I don't think it's fair for anyone to say like I'm self-made. I think we all, to certain extents, like stand on the shoulders of giants.
And if you redefine success not just as what you're able to individually accomplish, but as what you can help others accomplish as well, then it changes how you behave. I love the idea of like giving back doesn't have to be something that happens to the side, right? Giving back can be a part of the main thing that you do. But the key part, and people get it wrong sometimes, is not necessarily how you perform at first, it's how excited you are about the subject matter. You just have to show that you're willing to come out of your comfort zone and work on something exciting.
I think what people need to understand is that cybersecurity is a band of misfits. The definition of hackers is problem solving.
Yeah.
Like being able to break things apart, essentially. So Simeon, you're the CEO of KC7. I would love to hear from you. What is the greatest piece of professional advice you've ever received, and how did it impact you?
I would say the biggest thing is just like...
All right, crew. Today's guest is someone making a real impact in cybersecurity, both in the trenches and in the industry as a whole. Simeon Kakpovi is the founder of the KC7 Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to increasing diversity in cybersecurity and creating opportunities for the next generation of defenders. By breaking down barriers and expanding access to hands-on training, he's helping shape a more inclusive future for the field. By day, Simeon is a senior threat intelligence analyst at Microsoft, where he hunts down cyber threats and helps organizations stay ahead of adversaries. Before that, he was on the front lines of network defense as part of Lockheed Martin's computer incident response team, tackling security incidents head-on. His journey in tech is backed by an impressive academic background too. He holds a bachelor's degree in information systems from Howard University and a master's in technology policy from the University of Cambridge. But beyond the degrees and job titles, what really sets Simeon apart is his passion for mentorship, education, and making cybersecurity more accessible to those who might not see themselves as a fit in the field. We've got a lot to unpack today, so let's dive in. Welcome to KO's Launchpad. Here's Simeon Kakpovi. What's the vision with KC7?
Like long term?
Yeah, I think we talked about this for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that it's a way for people to understand like what cybersecurity is and what the big picture is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a way for people who are then interested in defensive cybersecurity to up-level their skills really quickly.
Yeah.
When we talk about cybersecurity, right, like there's so much to it, but at the end of the day, there's a big picture of what the fight is that we're fighting, right? Which is someone's either trying to take your stuff or ruin your stuff, and you're trying to stop them from doing that.
That's
so
fair.
It could be like they're trying to ransom you, or they're trying to steal your data, right? The CIA triad is a summary. But what does that mean realistically? It means that, hey, I have a company that's delivering vaccines to 10 million people, and someone wants to ransom me for $5 million and stop me from doing that. It could be that, I have a manufacturing company and someone's trying to steal my blueprints so that they can compete with me. It could be that, I'm a Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a certain country and somebody wants to get the insights on what I'm thinking so that they can better negotiate or figure out what I'm thinking before I actually say it. And I think a lot of times when people are getting into cybersecurity or talk to about cybersecurity, they miss that human aspect of it. And so they're like, okay, well, this isn't for me. So if you can get someone to get into this and they're like, wait a minute, this is something that I can relate to, and this is something that I could potentially see myself enjoying, then the number of people that you can have getting into the funnel is a lot larger. And then the part two is capturing people in the funnel. Yes, you have the interest, but then here's a continuous way you can develop your skills and lead you directly into the industry.
That's true. I haven't thought about it that way. And I think it's because the lens that I've always looked through. So when I was a practitioner, it's really common for practitioners to just think it's all about cybersecurity. I don't care about the business. I don't care about where the money's going to come from for this. I just want the coolest tools so I can have the best defense.
Yeah.
And that's just not a healthy way of looking at it, right? Because there's more to cybersecurity than just being a practitioner. And then after that, I was a solutions engineer and I was trying to protect small to medium-sized businesses. And then after that, I was a solutions architect and I was protecting the largest companies on earth. even, and they have a lens that they look through. But when we shrink it all the way back down, like if we're trying to get someone who has no experience in cybersecurity to get interest in cybersecurity, learn that it's awesome and a really fulfilling industry to be a part of, and then give them a whole lesson plan where they can gradually improve their skill set, like that's huge. And that's why I love KC7, because you're the founder and you have the vision for what is actually an amazing tool and platform for the industry. So I have full confidence that KC7 is going to take off. It's just a matter of time, man. It's a matter of time.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
Dude, how could I not? So, Simeon, you're in an amazing place right now in life. I would say, at least from my own perspective, like you're the founder of your own organization that does really, really amazing work for all kinds of people who have no understanding about cybersecurity. But you're a culmination of like habits that you've built over time. Like you were not always this person. I don't think it's fair for anyone to say like I'm self-made. I think we all, to certain extents, like stand on the shoulders of giants. So I'd love to unpack sort of the history of Simeon and get an understanding of how you got from point A to point B, made the certain, like why you made the navigations or the decisions that you did in your career. So that way, hopefully it informs someone else down the road. Like, hey, Simeon was here. I thought about that. Or maybe I want to be like Simeon or do something that you've done. And through listening to this, they'll have realized or maybe even potentially save themselves years off their career. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for taking the time. I'd love to hear what it was like for you kind of coming up. Where'd you get your start?
So background, my family comes from the Benin Republic, which is a small country in West Africa next to Nigeria. I was actually born there, came to the US when I was 8. And I think that informs a lot of my journey and how I view the world, right? So my parents came here with, little to no money, right? And my dad grew up in the village and you had to work to send himself to school. It's a lot tougher than it is in the US. And so when my parents came to the US, it's kind of a golden opportunity for you to mint a path for yourself, right? So it's essentially like you eat what you kill. If you work hard, you can have success for yourself. You can build a better life for yourself. And I think they've done a good job of trying to impart that on me. And I've seen how hard they work in everything they do. My mother never got a formal education, like never went to school, like none at all. She learned how to read as an adult. But even so, she didn't let that be a limiter. She's actually has one of the most brilliant business minds that you will ever meet. She ran a fish shop back when she was in Benin. She figured out how to do that. She would, figure out how to use business strategies to attract the most customers relative to her competitors. And, she was scaling that up and expanding the business because of how much profit she was doing. And even when she got to the United States, my parents figured out how to get into the real estate business just by like saving slowly, getting a small amount of funds and figuring out, okay, how can I take this small thing and use that to grow into something bigger? And so I think, being around my parents and seeing like their dedication to seeing things through is a big part of who I am. Like, hey, if I'm going to start something, and it's something that's worth my time, I'm going to figure out, hey, I want to do this and I'm going to do this right. And I'm going to see it through to the end. Sometimes you have to be a little bit persistent, right? And you have to like think about the thing that you're trying to do. Sometimes you have to like eat, live, breathe the thing. If it's like real estate, if it's you want to write a book, if it's you want to start a business, like you don't just do it. Okay, well, I'm going to wake up and maybe on Wednesday I'll think about it. Maybe on Thursday I won't. You have to wake up every single day and be like, okay, how can I make this thing that I'm working on right now better? How can I get to the end? And I think also that's a fun journey to go through, right? And you have to learn to get excited about the journey.
I agree. So where did you end up growing up? Like, did they immigrate over to this DMV area?
Yeah, so I grew up in the DMV area most of my life, which is very convenient because a lot of cybersecurity things are here. So I ended up never leaving. And then I went to an HBCU. I went to Howard University by accident, actually. And that was also a transformative experience, right? So my brother went to Howard. And so then I heard and I was like, all right, like you never want to do what your brother does, right? So I'm like, it's totally lame. I don't want to do that. I want to get away from home. I want to go to some other school. But then the big thing for me was like being able to afford school. And so pretty well. And they ended up giving me a scholarship. So when I saw the numbers, I was like, well, I can't really say no to this. So to Howard I went, and I was like, all right, like fine, like I'll go to this place and like whatever, like I'll get my degree. And it turned out to be a transformative experience for me. And a lot of people will tell you, right? Because especially if you go through school in most school systems, you might have like one or two Black teachers or professors. And then when you go to an HBCU, like every single last one of your professors, like 99% of professors are Black. And you don't really understand like how much of an impact it makes on your psyche to see yourself represented. Like if you close your eyes and you're like, oh, picture an accountant, right? Like in the mainstream media, based on all the stuff that you consume and your prejudices and your biases, right? Like you're going to picture like a white dude in a suit, right? Like 99% would picture that. But then if you go to Howard and you're in a school of business and you picture an accountant, you're going to imagine the people that you've seen teaching your accounting classes. And that's Black women, completely different. And so if you get exposed to that over and over again, the idea of like what's possible for you based on your exposure just completely changes. It changes the idea of what you think could be possible for you, which is incredible. And you don't really think about it until you're in that moment and you're seeing it over and over again. It gets normalized for you. And you're like, man, like that is really like something that impacts you in a powerful way.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just like I met a lot of teachers while I was there, and I can, drill into that as well, that, would go above and beyond just being a teacher because they wanted to see you succeed, because it's sort of a personal thing for them to see you succeed at the end of the day.
And what does it look like for a professor to go above and beyond?
Yeah. I mean, one of my professors, Professor Henley, right? He was an adjunct there, and he would out of pocket, like pay to get pizza and drinks once or twice a week and get students in the classroom so he could teach them how to code. He was like, hey, I will bribe you to come here and sit down and learn how to code because it can make you better. Like he wasn't getting paid for it. He was getting nothing out of it. He was literally spending money out of his own pocket. But he was like, hey, if I can make an impact on you, then that will have been success for me. And there's not a lot of people who would do something that crazy over long periods of time. And even just like professors who would like, I'd present an opportunity of like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, but maybe it's not right. And they'd be like, no, like, are you kidding? You should like totally do that. And that was me during the grad school process when I was like thinking about applying to certain things, but I was like, okay, maybe I'm not good enough. And they were like, no, like you should totally do this. So I had so many of those experiences where people like just poured into me and said, hey, you can do better than maybe what you thought you could. But the biggest lesson I learned from that was about giving back and the importance of that. Because at the end of the day, you reimagine, like, what does success look like? Like, is a big question, because that drives all the things that we do. And, part of success can be, getting a cool job. You could be a CEO, a CFO, et cetera. You can make a lot of money. But then if you redefine success, not just as what you're able to individually accomplish, but as what you can help others accomplish as well, then it changes how you behave. So if you can say, okay, well, I can become a CTO, I can make $1 million. But then if I'm still the only person of color in the room, then like what change did that really impact? If I can't create opportunities for others, because somebody did the work to get me in the room, right? Like I've talked to a lot of people who talk about being the first Black person and the only Black person ever in their entire company. And that wasn't that long ago. That might have been like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, just one in the entire company. And those people did work to create opportunities for others like them. And so, if I come along and I'm taking advantage of those opportunities and I'm not creating opportunities for anyone else, then I'm like, okay, well, what did I really accomplish at the end of the day, right? It's not as impressive or it's not as fulfilling. So a big thing for me is, yes, I can have personal success, but how can I have success that extends beyond myself, that will create the opportunity for someone who may not otherwise have that opportunity to come and do great things behind me?
That is huge. Like there were so many bars in there that you dropped that I loved and resonate with. The first one I wanted to talk about was how you have this experience where traditionally, if you think about an accountant, based on what you've seen, based on the zeitgeist that you're surrounded by, you think accountant, all right, white guy in a suit. For me, traditionally, I didn't really think of a lot of Filipinos as being successful in business. And there quite honestly aren't many successful Filipinos. Like if I were to ask you right now, how many successful Filipinos do you know right now besides Manny Pacquiao? Who could you list?
Yeah, I don't know if I could, not off the top of my head.
Yeah, it would be tough even for me.
Yeah.
I'm Filipino. So like seeing when, I was in my earlier 20s and I was in this program, Europe United, shout out Europe, changed my life. We had a mentor-mentee matchmaking program, signed up for it, and I got matched with now the CEO of an AI fintech company,
Wow.
Jotham Tai. So Jotham Tai, for me, is probably what Mr. Henley could be for you, right?
Yeah.
Like he's someone who just poured into me and really did not need to. And it's enriched my life in so many ways because he's part Filipino, and seeing someone who's even got like 1% Filipino in him reach the heights that he has, it's so inspirational, so refreshing, and something that we talk about pretty often is like, how can we uplift the community?
Yeah.
So eventually, as Astro begins to scale, I want to start looking at hiring some folks out of the Philippines because I would love to see the same impact that cybersecurity has had in my life, in theirs as well. So that kind of ties into the point about like giving back.
Yeah, I love that.
The other bit was I was on the way here, and like before this conversation, we were talking about how as a CEO, it could be really unnerving one moment, and it could be like a really peak high of emotions another moment.
Yeah.
And right after that, you can be in the trough of like disillusionment again.
Yeah.
So this isn't for everybody, but I think if we can persevere and be resilient through like these tough times and have this quiet confidence that things will be okay, we don't have to live out of just anxiety. We can also live in our truest forms of who we are, where we can build a company, we can challenge ourselves, but we can also uplift people along the way.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of alignment between like the vision you have and the vision that I have. So this is awesome already.
Yeah. And I love the idea of like, giving back doesn't have to be something that happens to the side, right? Giving back can be a part of the main thing that you do. Even with KC7, that's like a big thing that I've been trying to say is like diversity or like giving back or whatever altruistic thing you want to do. It doesn't have to be like a side function of generating revenue or succeeding as however you define it. It can actually enhance that, right? And you just have to figure out, well, how do I think about things differently so that I'm doing both at the same time? Which can be a little bit tougher, but if you can figure it out, it can actually be a huge boost, right? And it can allow us to think in ways that people may not think, or to invest and challenge ourselves to do things that no one else is doing.
Yeah, that's huge. It's like another energy source, right?
Yeah.
Like we wake up, we only have a limited amount of energy or even willpower throughout the day. It's why Mark Zuckerberg wore the same t-shirt and he became like memed as an alien because he was just trying to focus all that brain power, right? But beyond that energy source, I think when you're stretched so thin from like a mental perspective, it's harder to be more tired mentally than it is physically, in my own opinion.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
And when you're stretched that thin mentally, you just feel like you don't really have anything else to give. So then at some point you have to find inspiration from outside. And I think one of the things that always inspires me, no matter how tired I am, is one, having quality conversation like this, but also two, making impact in someone's life.
Yeah.
Like no matter how small. So I'd love to hear more about your journey from HBCU into even why you considered graduate school and how you ended up at Cambridge.
So I applied for Howard, got in. I actually was wanting to be a doctor, fun fact. And then, I did a summer before I got into college doing some canvassing work, some more political work. And so I was like trying to convince people to vote for a particular candidate. And I was like knocking on doors and talking to people. But then I don't want to go into politics. What it taught me was that I'm the type of person who enjoys a more nebulous challenge. Like trying to solve a problem in a way that no one else can do. I like ambiguity in the challenges that I face. In medicine, I'm sure there's nebulous challenges in medicine, obviously, but I didn't see myself when I reconsidered it being happy or fitting in that scenario. So I said, you know what? I'm going to try to do something completely different. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to business school, tried accounting. I was like, okay, definitely not that. I tried doing some IT stuff and I was like, okay, we're getting warmer. And then when I got into the cybersecurity space, I was like, you know what? Like, this is it right here. And what really sealed it was I did this challenge called the National Cyber Analyst Challenge that Lockheed Martin hosted. This was in like sophomore in 2016. And it was a case study. I was like, all right, bet I know how to do a case study, right? Give you a couple challenge prompts. You do some slides, you present it, everybody goes home, everybody's happy. And then mail me a physical flash drive. I'm like, what? That don't make no sense.
What's in there?
Yeah, right? And it contains 80 gigabytes of data, like PCAP, Wireshark PCAP, like memory forensics, all this other stuff.
Love PCAP.
And I'm like, again, like I just said yesterday, like I'm interested in cybersecurity, and they're giving me like all this stuff that I'd never taken a cybersecurity class before, like nothing. They're like, all right, like good luck. And I was way in above my head, but I was begging teachers for like, hey, what can I try? I was using Excel to like parse, like to like go through Wireshark and parse and map. I was doing everything completely wrong, but I got sort of to an answer, right? And the most important part of that journey was realize that I had a lot of fun doing it, right? And that was a click moment of like, I would enjoy doing this for a long time. And so that's how I ended up committing to cyber defense. And I've been doing that. That was about 9 years ago. And I did 3 internships as a result of that in cyber defense. I got to sit down, look at data for a long time.
How'd you go about navigating, looking for these internships?
Well, I got one internship, and then at the end, someone says, hey, sometimes these can turn into during the school year things. So at the end of it, I asked my manager, hey, is there any way I can prolong this? And it's like, we can have you on during the school year. So in the summer, I was full-time, and then during the rest of the year, I was part-time, like 2-3 days a week, sitting in the office, seeing what everyone else is doing, working on intrusions, just learning from people, building relationships, all that.
Gotcha.
That made a huge difference because it takes time to like mold your brain sometimes.
That's true. Neuroplasticity. It's important, especially in our youth. So would you say that your internship experience was due in large part to how well you did at that first internship experience, which you found through school? Like that was the path that you sort of navigated?
Yes.
Okay.
Not through my performance in the challenge. I actually did horribly. I performed horribly, but the key part, and people get it wrong sometimes, it's not necessarily how you perform at first. It's how excited you are about the subject matter, right? Because it's kind of like a chart, right? And you're trying to project what's important is like the slope of the graph, not necessarily the starting point, right? It's like the slope. So you want someone who is excited about it and will continue to be excited about it and wants to commit to learning and getting better at it. Not necessarily someone who knows the most, but is not necessarily passionate about it because they're going to flatten out really quickly.
That's true.
And so it was more about how passionate about it. And even during my internship, I had moments where I was like, am I even good at this? Will I even succeed at this? And I had those moments, but I was like, you know what? Let me just keep going. And that ended up being the most important thing, right? And I would just come in and ask questions. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not good today, but I'm going to keep drilling down on this and eventually I can get there.
So what advice would you give to someone who might be in this job market, which is pretty tough to find a role in? What advice would you give them on how to frame the right mindset for resilience? Like how to keep coming back when you've heard no after no? What advice would you give to someone who's just heard so many no's to get back in there and fight that same fight every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's a numbers game, right? You just have to keep coming back as many times as possible. And sometimes it's like, don't wait until you have the job to engage in the community because cybersecurity is such a huge community thing. And who you know and your interactions and your reputation, all that stuff plays a part, right? People want someone to be part of their team who's going to bring excitement, innovation, etc. And you don't have to wait until you get a job to prove that you can bring that to the table. You can go to your local conferences, like your local B-sides, and you can present before you even have your job, right? You just have to show that you're willing to come out of your comfort zone and work on something exciting. You can work on maybe open source projects. You can do a report. You can do all these things to show that like, hey, I don't have the job yet, but I am doing everything within my current capacity to learn and to grow and to show that I can make it in this industry. Because that same hunger and excitement will correlate directly to what you do on the job. That's a good predictor for what you're going to do on the job. And people want someone who has that hunger and who has that excitement for the role, right? They want good vibes, right? You don't want to hire somebody that's like, oh, I don't like this. Like, fine. Like, I want to be here or whatever. You want someone who comes in every day and says like, man, I love this. Like, let's get after it. Let's win the game, right? Let's protect our customers. Let's make bad guys, they suck. Let's write good detections. Let's figure out new ways to solve this problem. That's the energy that people want. And that's infectious. And that's what you want to bring to the table, right? Even if you know nothing, right? If you come in and you know nothing, but you bring good vibes every single day, like that's at least a starting point.
Infectious energy is huge. Like when I think back on some of my favorite coworkers ever, and I'm talking about even outside of cybersecurity, even outside of sales, like at Chipotle, even when I was wrapping burritos, I'm down, man. I'm down bad. I do not want to be there. And I just I look next to me and my cashier just has a smile on their face and they're like, we got this, bro. We're good. Like those moments when you're just in the trenches, think about those moments. Like think about the people who show up. And I think I've actually had a discussion about this with a SANS instructor, like the indomitable will of a human being to persevere when they know that they're doing that next to someone that they care about. You can overcome any circumstance. So infectious vibes, that's going to be a key one for this one. So you go through the internship process. Is that how you end up finding your first role in security? And what does that look like?
So I go through the internship process and then I actually get an offer before I go to grad school. So I have a full-time offer before I go to grad school.
Very nice.
I went through the grad school application process. I applied for a bunch of scholarships. Didn't get any of them, but I was lucky enough to have, someone from the board of trustees of my school who was kind enough to like fund my trip to Cambridge. And I was like, I'll take that opportunity. So it was like once in a lifetime opportunity. I didn't know what Cambridge was till I started applying to it.
What?
I was like, I had no idea. And then I was like, oh, this is a thing? This is kind of cool.
Didn't know what Howard was. Didn't know what Cambridge was. Didn't know what Microsoft was.
My parents didn't go through this process, right? So I had no idea of these process.
You never watched movies when you were growing up, bro?
But like not really. They don't really talk about these. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
You see like a James Bond film.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't know and I was like, whoa, what is this? This seems kind of cool. I want to go there.
What was the motivation behind pursuing graduate school?
For Cambridge, primarily, it was a beautiful place. I'm not going to lie.
It's like, I just want to go there. It's pretty.
But the other part is you get to meet so many cool people and you get to like come outside of your bubble and get like an international perspective, right? Like when you're in the US, things are like very like us. Like, it's very America. And then when you go international, right, you meet all types of people, right? You get like different viewpoints that you'd have never considered before. And I think that gives you a different perspective on the world and give different people to exchange ideas with that can like make your worldview a little bit more balanced. And so that was a really cool opportunity to do it and really, and not just even just within your subject matter, not just within cybersecurity, but I got to meet people who were completely different professions, right? Like economics and law and healthcare. You just get different perspective that can inform the way that you think about the world and give you new ideas that you can use to inform the one problem that you are working on right now. The other thing is grad school in the UK is a year versus 2 years in the US. And I wanted to when I got back to the US, I wanted to get after in my cybersecurity career.
They're lacking with that, man.
I'll do like 1 year here, get back to the US, and then like full speed, like we'll go.
Okay, so I kind of want to rewind a little bit. It seems like you have this track record where people are just willing to help you out, man. Like Mr. Henley. It sounds like you had an advisor who really pushed you to get into Cambridge. And I'm sure those aren't the only two examples, at least through your educational career, where someone was like, I see something in you. I want to continue investing in you. Like, what do you think were some of the reasons behind why other folks have been so invested in your success?
Yeah, I mean, when I was going to grad school, realistically, so the story behind how I decided to even go to grad school, because I didn't know if I want to do it. I was applying for a couple of scholarships. It was like the Marshall and the Rhodes scholarships for like grad school in the UK. And in that process, right, the real value behind that process, like whether or not you get it or not.
Like pursuing grad school?
Or pursuing certain scholarships is that they force you to sit down and they ask you like, Kay, what do you want to do with your life? Like, what impact do you want to make on the world? And you have to write that in an essay. And like, I think for a lot of people, you don't really think about these big questions, or you don't have to put it on paper. You just want to say like, I want to get a job and I want to graduate college. And then I want to just like vibe,
Let me get that grant money, please.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But if you have to like think about it and say like, what is the very concrete impact on the world that I want to have? You got to sit there and really wrestle with yourself for months. It's uncomfortable and like figure that thing out. And I think that part was very useful for me because I figured out, hey, there are two things that I want to do. That's what I came down to. There's two things I want to do. One, I want to make an impact in cybersecurity somehow, make the world safer for people like on the internet using online service. And two, create more opportunities for people from unconventional backgrounds to succeed in cybersecurity, for Black people to succeed in cybersecurity. And these are my two things, right? And I was like, hey, if you invest in my journey, this is the outcome that you will get. And so it was crystal clear. Right? To this day, these are my two things. If you invest in Simeon, these are the things that I will go and I will do. And I have a good track record. I will try to have a good track record of making these things happen. And I'm really passionate about doing these two things. And all the things that I work on are pointing in this direction.
Gotcha.
And until I'm done with this, like I will be focused on this until I'm done with that. And then when I'm done with that, maybe I'll go and I'll do something else.
Okay. So this goes back to what you're saying about how when you start something, you want to see it through to fruition.
Yeah.
Even when it's tough, even when it's hard, even when it's daunting, even when you're on the verge of collapse.
Yeah.
Persevere here. I love that. So from then on, you are wrapping up at Cambridge. You get this global experience that ends up informing a lot of your worldview. And I'm sure that just forms these neural pathways where you're able to approach situations from a perspective or lens that would account for more perspectives than most people would, especially as Americans. From then on, your first role in cybersecurity is as
I was a SOC analyst at a defense contractor.
Humble beginnings. We love it.
Exactly. But it was the same company where I had interned for 3 years, right? So again, I was like an intern. They call me the forever intern there for 3 years. And so the benefit was that by the time I started full time, like I knew where everything was, right? Like I'm not like a new hire. You got to train me for like 6 months, a year. Like I came in, I was like, all right, like I know how to use the tools. I know how to use the process. I know all the people. Like day one, like let me at them.
Yeah.
Right. I've been here before. I know how this works.
Guns
like,
blazing, straight incident.
Like, let's do it. Like, give me a ticket. Like, let me solve it. Like,
Okay.
give me a thing. Like, I'll go make it for you.
Yeah.
And that was a huge advantage because even, I was allocated like, 3 months to like, ramp up again. I used those 3 months to go and explore things as opposed to learning from the ground up. Like, no pressure, go and explore interesting things that I wanted to.
Like self-study within cyber, or you were just walking around the building?
No, just like, as opposed to like, you have like 20 tickets to resolve or whatever, you can go and you can just like work on interesting projects, right? And I use that time to like do more threat intel-y stuff, right? Do some threat actor tracking that then set me up for the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Which ultimately I ended up, working in threat intelligence. But that was like the moment where I was like, okay, well, I want to do more threat intel stuff. Let me get a little bit more practice while I have the flexibility to do that.
Before there's full pressure on you.
Full pressure to do all this other stuff.
I gotcha. So you're already capable of operating at like 100% SOC analyst capacity, but they give you this 3-month window where you can kind of onboard and maybe not run on all cylinders quite yet. So you use that time to focus on threat intelligence. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So a couple things. One is, that's crazy because the exact same thing happened to me when I was at NASA. I got hired in, didn't know what a clearance was, didn't realize that after the application process and the investigation process, you need to wait a little bit. And until you have like an interim clearance or your actual clearance that's provisioned, you don't have access to tools that you need for your job. So this might be a surprise to some people, but I was chilling for my first couple months at NASA because the same thing happened. I just didn't have access to any tools. So I was sitting there in a room, and similar to you, I was like, I'm not just going to fumble this opportunity. Plus, I'm not the kind of person I could just sit still. I'm always bouncing around. I have to be learning something. So I ended up studying for my CISSP during that time. And that certification opened up so many doors for me, Simeon. It was crazy. Even though it's not the most difficult certification I've ever studied for, just the notoriety of that cert changed the complete trajectory of my career outlook. So love to hear that you were productive the same way I was. The second one was, like, how did you start to key in to this idea that threat intelligence was the specialty for you in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the one that's, honestly, it was the sexiest one, right? Like,
some would say red teaming is the sexiest, though.
Yeah, but my hot take. In red teaming, you're working in a very controlled environment, right? Like within a company, there's not really any, the company's not going to fight back. It's like the company is just kind of like a sitting duck. And sure, there's blue teamers that are going to come after you, but it's just one company and that's cool. But when you're in blue team land, threat intel land, there is literally someone out there who's trying to mess you up. It's not theoretical anymore. It's not like a playground. There are no boundaries. There are no rules. Someone is trying to make you have a bad day. There's a real person, flesh and bones out there who is trying to mess you up. And I think that is exhilarating, right? It's like you ever play video games in the past, there's the controlled area where everyone's nice to each other. And there's PvP land where everyone's messing each other up. I think that's what it's kind of like, right? The idea that there's major consequences and there's like real organizations and entities that are like governments, criminals who are in this playing field, and if you can stop it, you can literally make someone out there have a terrible day.
That's true. You play RuneScape by chance?
I was talking about RuneScape.
Oh my goodness, dude. That was the immediate...
Yes.
I remember ending up in the wild, like not knowing I was in the wild, and I just gink, lose all
your stuff.
Oh my,
it's gone.
Wow. That is an excellent analogy. I felt that viscerally in my soul.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
So like if you're the red teamer, yeah, sure, you do something for the company, but like you're going to give them a report at the end of the day and then you go about your day, right? Like if you're in threat intelligence or even in the blue team, like in a defense perspective, like, you know, it may be like Russia or China are coming after you and they're trying to mess you up. There's like somebody real out there and they you can't say like, oh, pause, time out. Wait. No. This wasn't part of the plan. There's none of that, right? Like, like someone's like halfway through taking all your files and they're about to expedite you, like time out. None of that. They will mess you up, right? And they are excited to mess you up, right?
That's so real.
They're thrilled to mess you up. So the idea that you can stop that or you can understand that in some way is, I feel like it's like playing on the real playing field.
Yeah, that was a hot take. That was probably one of the hottest takes that I've ever heard. And I was ready to fight. But now that I've heard your piece, I respect you.
Yeah. I mean, red team's cool too. Like, it's pretty exciting, but like, that's the thing that does it for me. And I think like blue team and threat intel, a lot of people don't get that perspective when they're coming in, right? And that's part of the KC7 thing too. A lot of people don't see that piece. And so a lot of times people are like advertising red teaming because it's a little bit have a sexier story because people don't get the sexy part of blue teaming.
Yeah, it's very painful on the blue team side. So I can see both sides of the fence. I was a former defensive practitioner, tier 1, and then shift lead in the NASA SOC. And then I was an IR consultant for a little while. So I got to see the actual ramifications of organizations who were devastated by ransomware. And it's not pretty, man. Like, just like you said, you're not going to go mid encryption and say, hold on, pause. I have a job to do. My boss is going to be mad. Like, they're coming for you and they do not care. They're ruthless. And then on the other side of the fence, I run a penetration testing firm. So I'm definitely going to hear some flames in the chat when I share this episode with them. Love to hear both sides of the argument, actually. So you're getting pretty well integrated into the threat intelligence community. What advice would you give to someone who's either just getting into cybersecurity or has maybe a year or two in it and wants to start specializing within this domain? What direction would you point them in?
Yeah, I mean, threat intel is like really just like a small bubble, even within the blue team space. And I think a lot of that goes back to like building relationships and then showing that you have that interest. So I think Katie Nichols, she does a lot of courses for SANS, Red Canary. She's big on Twitter, on social media, has a lot of really cool resources on how to get in on cybersecurity. John Doyle as well has a lot of really good resources about how to break in to threat intel. Because sometimes the hard part about threat intel is like, usually you kind of have to be in it already and you kind of have to accidentally whittle your way into a good organization with good, interesting data in order to get those reps. Otherwise, it's very hard. And that's part of the KC7 thing. There's a lot of things that you can do, right? You can read the reports. There's good books out there that you can read. There's a lot of like open, like OTH, like open source data that you can use, like VT and virus and census. There's a lot of good blogs out there that you can read and try to understand what people are doing. And then the other part is like building relationships, going to conferences so you can meet some of those people, talk to them about their perspectives, etc. But at the end of the day, it comes down to having the data to practice on. If you don't have that, it can be very, very tough, which is part of the KC7 thing when it comes to like threat intel perspective. If you want to understand how to cluster threat actor activity and understand it, you have to be in a place with interesting threat actor activity.
When you say cluster, do you mean attribution to a certain threat actor group?
Exactly. Like, How do I know, like, I'm looking at Cozy Bear versus Lazarus, right? That's part of the threat intel equation is trying to understand your adversary a little bit better so you can make risk-based decisions about your defenses, right?
So how do you tell between a threat actor group that might be out in Russia as opposed to like the Lazarus group out of North Korea?
The secret is that they make mistakes, and it's about figuring out what mistakes they make and taking advantage of that to better understand them, right? Because again, there's some human behind the scene and they are doing stuff, and their stuff is going to show up as data to you, right? And you're looking at that data, right? And they have no idea what they're showing and what they're not showing. And you have to essentially expose as much data as possible to help you differentiate between them. And so sometimes there's like cool things you can use, like pattern of life analysis, right? If someone operates at a certain time or does certain things at a certain time, they may not know it, but you might be able to see it in your data of like, hey, this person only clicks this button between these 2 hours of the day, and they do that consistently. And so that might mean that they're working in these hours.
Gotcha.
Or, right, they may compile their malware and leave certain hints, like a language setting, or they might use certain pieces of code that only people in this region of the world like to use. So you can like use these small things that people are doing that they don't know that they're doing to figure out who it is. And it's not always 100% game, but essentially the game is trying to get as close to it as possible.
Yeah, like I think an example of this would be, so after the Shadow Brokers, attack tool dump, the Lazarus group unleashed NotPetya on the entire world. And there was so much ransomware everywhere, causing billions of dollars of damage. And when they were ripping this code apart to try and figure out who the hell this was, they used exactly what you mentioned. There's a little bit of code that ends up being reused over and over and over again by this same threat actor group. And after comparing the notes, we all realize all this damage went back to the same group. And that happened to be Lazarus out of North Korea. Gotcha.
Yeah, cool thing people say is that like, at the end of the day, we're humans, right? We do a lot of things and we have habits, and we don't always know what our habits are, right? So you walk a certain way, and there's a certain rhythm to your walk that's like uniquely, right? You might speak a certain way, or you might like, even when you get home, you slam the door a certain way, right? And so, if you have like 2 or 3 roommates, usually over time, you can tell who's home by the way they slam the door. Or this person likes to slam the door and then put down their keys so you can hear keys jiggling and then take off their shoes. This other person never takes off their shoes, so just go stomping around the house. Or this other person, likes to yell on the phone as soon as they come home. And so you can start to profile different people. You can't see them, but just based on what you hear, you can start to figure out who it is that's coming home. And we do the same thing with threat actors. They have patterns because they're humans or they have processes. And you can start to profile these things to understand the differences between them.
Yeah, I think you know your family when you can profile them based on how heavy their footsteps are. Oh my goodness. How many roles have you had since your first one?
Just 2.
Just 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got Microsoft, and then before Microsoft, there was?
Just a Lockheed.
Just Lockheed?
Yeah, just
SOC Analyst role?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're a SOC Analyst at Lockheed. What do you feel like are some of the greatest skills that you will need to pick up to be an effective SOC Analyst?
Yeah, it's very similar to threat intelligence. I think the main thing is learning how to be an analyst. Being an analyst is like a muscle you have to build. You can read about it, you can hear about it, but you really have to do it and get reps doing it. You talked about neuroplasticity, like figure out how to change your mind into being good at doing it. It's about being able to ask the right questions about a situation at the right time, and then being able to think creatively about how you apply defenses. Hey, I'm in this intrusion. I'm looking at this piece of evidence, or I have this alert. Like, what question do I ask next? The best analysts and the people who are really good at doing this are the people who are most creative and intuitive about where to look next.
Or have ADHD.
Yeah, one of those two. But it's always a question of, I'm seeing this thing, I have no idea what it is. Like, is it normal for my environment? Is it weird for environment? Does it mean that I'm compromised? Should I be starting an IR? Or does it mean that someone is dinking around? Or is it nothing at all and it's normal? And where can I find more information about this? Do I have more information about this, right? This is my hot take. There's a lot of technologies you can learn, and those technologies are endless.
Name a few that are critical for a SOC analyst to know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of networking you have to know, right? Depending on how your organization is configured. Like you can learn about Active Directory, you can learn about cloud stuff, you can learn about forensics, you can learn about threat actor, TTPs. Like there's so many domains you can go to, but at the end of the day, it comes down to like, hey, do you have an understanding of where this fits into the picture and how we can use this to detect whether or not we're compromised, whether or not someone has tried to compromise us, and how we can implement the right defenses. What I always tell people is you have to figure out how to get yourself in a place where you're practicing that neuroplasticity, where you're in that situation over and over again. You're getting those reps. You're like, okay, I'm here again. I have a domain or I have anomalous login and I have to figure out, have I been targeted? Have I been compromised? You know, how do I find all the rest of the activity? Very similar with incident response, really. How do I find the other things and how do I get more context about what is happening?
Yeah. What was your favorite part about being a SOC analyst?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes for me, it's always just about like, I'm a big programmer, like automating things and like figuring out how to get more insights out of the things that you have, right? Like, how do I write a script to take advantage of some new data source to like enrich my processes and help me understand what's going on better, right? So if I can take an alert that normally takes me 5 hours to work and I can condense that and auto enrich and it takes me 5 minutes instead, then I can get to the answer fast so I can look at more stuff, right? I can burn the adversary faster when it comes down to it. And that's always the most, that's the coolest part for me. People lean different ways. I lean towards automation, data, and
maximum efficiency.
That's what always excites me, thinking about how can I do this better, faster, cooler, to find the next thing.
It's always great to spend 40 hours trying to fix something that would have taken you 3 hours manually, but you're trying to automate it. So it's worth
it. But the next time, it's going to be a little bit easier.
That's true.
You have to think about the future. It's like an investment in yourself.
So how long were you a SOC analyst for before you decided that, you know, it was maybe time for you to move on to something new?
I was for about 2 years.
For about 2 years?
Yeah.
I feel like that tends to be the sweet spot, you know? 2 years of pain.
Yeah. And the cool thing for me, I was there for 2 years and, you know, those role opened up that was much higher than a level than, you know, I had in years. And I was like, you know what, like I'll shoot my shot. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to get this. And then I shot my shot. And then they were like, hey, we got an interview for you. And I'm like, really? And I was like, I'll take the interview even just to like meet with people and like talk to people and like see a different experience. Then I went through the interview and it was, you know, it was a success. And I was like, wait, is this really happening right now? And so, you know, 2 years and, you know, it was kind of a little bit shorter than I intended to be there. And yeah, that's how I got my next gig in threat intel. And, you know, that's been a blast.
At Microsoft, where you are at today, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what's the interview process like for someone in threat intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, primarily it comes down to what I just told you, right? Like, hey, you're in this scenario. You have these things available to you. How do you figure out how to understand threat actor activity? That's the core of threat intel. It's like, hey, you have this thing. How do you better understand what your adversary is doing? How do you profile the TTPs of your actor? How do you tell the difference?
So is it more scenario based for the interview style as opposed to like for incident response, they just give you logs and say, find what you can find?
Yeah, it's scenario based. And it depends on like who's interviewing you as well, right? Depending on what company you're interviewing for, like depending on who you're talking to, it's going to be very different. When I do interviews, I tend to actually show people logs and like, hey, here's some logs. Like, let's pivot, right? Like, let's find it. Let's get after it. So as opposed to talking theoretically, I will actually show you the thing and let you talk me through the process.
Spreading PII?
No. Well, yeah, I know. But the cool thing is, right? Do I happen to have a private data set of intrusion data?
True.
Yeah.
True. Good call.
That's the secret.
Galaxy brain play right there. Okay. So walk me through what the journey of threat intelligence analyst at Microsoft could look like, because you've been there for a few years now.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Microsoft is like a pretty big player in the threat intel game and does like a lot of things publicly, and they publish a lot of blogs about threat actors. And so really, you know, that's all about like understanding what your adversary is doing so you can use that to protect customers, put indicators into production that's going to come down to the product, right? So that when someone gets an alert and they're like, hey, here's a bad potential thing that's happened, they also get context about like, okay, well, here's who maybe doing it, and here's what defenses you might put in play.
So it's enriched context.
Enriched context in the data. And that's a really cool thing, because sometimes you have no idea, and then a thing targets you and you're like, oh, well, I don't know what I should do. Like, what should I be focusing on?
Yeah.
There's so many things I could be investing in.
Is it a password reset, or do I have to burn the server down to the ground?
If someone has like 2 years of experience looking at whatever that thing is, right? And if like, well, I learned these lessons for the past 2 years, and I'm just going to like put it in a box, wrap it with a bow, and like just give you the insights of like, here you should do A, B, C, D, and E. That's going to make you a much better defender, right? If you're working an incident and you get an IP, for example, and you're like, oh, like, here's an IP. Do we need to like shut everything down and kick out the adversary now? Or should like I wait a little bit and learn more? Well, that's going to depend, right? It's going to depend on like, is this a ransomware actor that's about to like mess me up like in about the next 5 minutes? Or is it like maybe a nation state threat actor who's going to hang out for a while? And maybe I need to like chill. It's going to be slow, and find out more information so I can kick him out, right? You have to make that on a fly call. And I think, we're trying to generate insights that give defenders that advantage, right? In the heat of the moment.
That's huge, like absolutely huge to call out, because you touched on how sometimes certain TTPs will allude to a certain threat actor, but sometimes like APT TTPs can allude to a threat actor that plans to be there for a while.
Yeah.
And if you rush to close the first door with an APT, they're just going to find another one, or they'll have backdoored you somehow. And it's not an effective defense to just play whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Like you need to, that's happened to you?
Well, not to me personally, but.
Oh, I thought that's what you said. I thought that was a really, really great call out. And I didn't know that until I took like an advanced incident response class where they tell you like, not every incident's the same. So continue, please.
Yeah, but I think that's it, right? Like understanding the threat actors and then using that to inform what others can see. I think Microsoft is cool because it's such a big company and we have such a large footprint that you get to protect a lot more people and you get to play the big game on the big stage, right? So it's always a lot of fun, right? And then you get to meet so many cool people who are very smart and working on different types of things, and you get to learn from them and the techniques. And we have like, again, we have so many products and you're in the cloud, right? You get to like, there's always some new thing that adversaries are doing that you can go chase and understand and try to mitigate. And the world is changing too. So adversaries will change what they're doing. And so like one day they're doing this thing and the next day they're doing something completely different. And so you have to be on your toes and like figuring out, okay, how do I improve myself so that I can respond to how adversaries improve themselves? That's what I really enjoy. Never get stalled.
That's awesome. So it seems like there's a never-ending world of threats out there that never stop evolving, and they're coming for you all the time, and you can never say pause. As a SOC analyst, it's really, really scary, but that's the reality of the world of security. Like these organizations who are coming to exfiltrate your data, to ransom you, to hurt you, and take the key to the kingdom, they are relentless, and they only need to get it right once. I think that's the distinction that's really scary about comparing like red team or penetration testing to working on the blue team side of the fence. Like with the penetration tests, I get it right and I'm good, right?
I'm going to challenge that, right? I think people always say that. I think from a blue team perspective, we think about that the other way. As a red teamer, you don't have to be just right just once. You have to be right a lot of times. And if you mess up just once, like I got you, right? And that's the whole point of detections. We talk about like cyber kill chain and putting detections in place, and we're putting traps in all these places. So you got to be right when you do your recon, so I don't figure out you're doing recon against me. You got to write your tools in a perfect way such that I'm not already blocking it, right? Or I won't detect it via any of my detections. Or you're moving laterally, you got to use tools that I'm not going to detect. Or like, so I'm setting traps along, like, if you think about cyber kill chain at every single step, and you got to be right every single time. And when you get to that C2 phase, you got to make sure that I'm not already blocking it, or I don't have a C2 in place for that. When you get into data exfil phase, you got to make sure that you're not in a honeypot, or you're not using some tool that's going to get blocked or flagged. If you run Mimikatz, like, boom, I got you. You got to go through every single phase if you want to get that data out, right? Yeah. You got to figure out how to get in, move laterally, grab the data, and you're like, you're stomping around, like trying to do stuff. And I got like, I got cameras and I got security guards going around, like digital security guards, and I'm trying to catch you. So you have to be right over and over and over. And if you mess up and you run Mimikatz too early and I got a detection for that, boom, I got you. I'm going to shut down your entire operation. And so the idea that like attackers have to be right once, no, you got to be right a lot of times. And as a defender, I got a lot of chances to detect you and to kick you out and to mitigate that, right? And I think that's the exciting thing about the defense is adversaries going to come for you, but they got to do a whole lot of things right. And I got a whole lot of opportunities to catch you. And when I catch you, you use a 0 against me, I'm going to burn your $1 million 0 days. And that's going to suck for you. Or if you spent the last 5 months trying to architect the perfect intrusion and you have like,
I got Stuxnet on you.
Yeah, you got like all these like plans. You did your recon, you did your research, you did your homework, you set up your implant, you got all this thing coming. And you messed up once because you called out to a C2 at the wrong time of day. And I was like, that's not right. All of a sudden, I just burned 5 months or X number of months of your plans. So again, I think it depends on your perspective. If you flip that on its head, defenders only got to be right once. Granted, they got to be right once against a lot of different adversaries. That's the difference.
Yeah. So not only, point well taken. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love how you walk through the defenses, like the actual defense in depth. You have security controls, so that way, should anything slip through the cracks, we catch you again. Ideally, I think what's tough is that there are very few organizations on this entire planet are as robust in terms of their defense in depth capability as Microsoft would. Microsoft arguably might be number one in terms of your ability to defend because you've got so much exposure to all the computers that run Windows operating system. So I've actually heard a couple of times that, and I know this is going to be contentious, but Microsoft actually has the number one rated threat intelligence team. Is that accurate?
I would say so.
Biased or not?
No bias.
Of course.
Send this to my boss.
Okay. That's going to be an excellent clip right there. How many years have you been at Microsoft doing threat intelligence, Simeon?
Been about 3 years.
So it's been about 3 years.
Yeah.
And where can you see your career in threat intelligence evolving? Like, would it be as a independent contributor, continuing down this path? Do you see yourself in leadership? Like, what are the avenues a threat intel person can go?
I don't know. Everything's on the table. I think, the world changes so fast that you really don't know what's about to happen. I think I'm definitely open to being in leadership. I love contributing, like I said, and helping people grow their careers and helping shape the path of where people go. I enjoy the actual like hands-on keyboard, like, analysis, right? That still drives me, but I love also contributing to and thinking about the bigger picture. I'm still fairly early in my career, so I think there's not really any rush for me. I think I can kind of slow down and enjoy the process and see what my options are.
Yeah. No, that's huge. So we've only talked about your roles and your experience as an individual contributor. We haven't even touched KC7 yet. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, what is KC7 and how did the idea for KC7 start?
Yeah, I talked before about how I got into cybersecurity by playing a cybersecurity game. And even though I was not good at it, it was that moment when I realized that like, this is the thing that we're talking about, right? Like you do all these, like, have you ever taken like a basic cybersecurity class and like day one, like you're going to do networking and day two, you're going to do some like binary stuff. And then like the real cybersecurity, like meets don't come until like, year 3, course 5 or something.
Like ripping apart a hex.
Yeah. But when you go through an entire intrusion, like you get to see the full story and you're like, oh yeah, like this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that was such a transformative experience for me that I thought that like, hey, if more people had a chance to go through this process, a lot more people would be like, oh yeah, like this is it for me. But unfortunately, that program was only available for like 90 students or something like that, right? Because it was very expensive to make the data. And once you have sensitive data like that, or you have a cool data set like that, you don't want to just give it to everyone. But I was like, hey, this was such a cool thing for a few people to have. If you can bring it to the masses, it would literally transform how people perceive this field and how many people want to go into this field, which would thereby give more opportunities for people who didn't think of themselves as belonging in cybersecurity to get into the field. And so I thought a lot about, how do you create a data set that is anonymized, right? Not held by like we talked about privacy earlier, so that more people could just like look at intrusions and enjoy doing that. And so I was working with Professor Henley, who was leading a community college program at the time for cybersecurity. And we started working on a way to like do a broke boy version of that. I don't know anything about red teaming.
MVP, man.
Yeah, I don't have any money. I don't know anything about cloud architecture or like setting up my own or like setting up complex labs or anything. But I know what intrusions logs look like, and I can fake a good one. And so I started writing some Python code to fake what cybersecurity data from an intrusion would look like. And it took about 3 to 4 years to get a good MVP to prove to people like, hey, this could be very interesting. And then after that, I started getting some folks on board. And then we took that from a cool MVP to something that's starting to look like the real thing. And so when people play it, and we've had to learn a lot of lessons along the way. Mm-hmm. When people play it, right, the idea is that they start to get it immediately. And they're like, oh, this is what we're talking about. This is why I should use MFA. This is why I should not click on a link. This is what happens afterwards. And they go from that to, okay, I can work on a more complicated intrusion. I can work on different types of intrusions. And they are just like playing a stupid game, but that's just like building neuroplasticity. So when you do that over a certain amount of time, you can drag and drop someone into a real environment. Maybe they have never seen real intrusion data, but the same skill sets apply that you need. You asked me earlier about what skills you need. And I talked about being in a particular position, seeing a thing that is suspicious, and being able to ask the right questions to understand what the threat is. That's what you start building over time. Your brain starts asking those questions and you just get good at it, or you get used to doing that.
So there's this important distinction that I think is best exemplified by the experience of one of the players of this game. So for the people who don't know, KC7 is a compilation of games that can take someone from absolute zero. I'm talking zero, no technical knowledge, not even IT help desk. You could be wrapping burritos like I was about a decade ago. And you could invest a few hours into this game and be decently competent in multiple domains of IT, networking, and cybersecurity. An incredible example of someone who was able to go from no technical knowledge but had that analytical mindset was someone I believe by the name of Jibby.
Yes.
Is that right? Do you mind? Jibby is a legend. I would love to hear about Jibby the legend story, but from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Jibby, there's a whole podcast out there that Jibby does. We can link it in the bio, where he tells the story a lot better than I can. But I went to Sans New to Cyber a couple of years ago because I met someone who believed in it, who linked me with someone else who believed in it, who said, you should go present at this thing. So I was presenting at this thing and I was talking shit, which as I do, you can censor that or not. And I was like, hey, like you can play this game. And if you play enough of this game, you can get to the point where you can have a conversation with a recruiter and they will be so confused because it will not make sense to you why you know the things that you do. Hear you speak and they'll be like, all right, like you can only know these things if you've worked like X number of years in cybersecurity, which would make no sense for you. And I am waiting for that day. And so Jibby's a watchmaker in LA and he's like sitting in his shop and he's just gotten into exploring cybersecurity and he listens to me. But unlike 95% of the people who listen to me and like be like, all right, that guy's just talking, Jibby took my word for it. And he said, you know what? I'm going to do this. He took it personally. And the thing about Jibby is like, dude is driven. Like he's hardcore. Like if I'm going to do something, we talked about seeing it through. He's a see it through kind of guy. And so he started with KC7 and he wasn't necessarily the best, but he was the most persistent player on that platform. So we'll do these live events. He would come out somewhere in the middle, but then afterwards he would come back and he would slowly climb and finish. And every single time, not the fastest, like tortoise in the hare, he would come back and he would see it through every single time. And over time, he got better at it. He got more confident. He completed all our challenges. He would go back and try to really understand the data. And then he would help people out in our community create a safe space. And then we said, hey, you've finished everything that we've got. Would you like to make them? So he started making the challenges. Which again, like it's one thing to solve a KC7 challenge, another thing to make it. Because now you have to understand the intrusion so well that you have to imagine in your head what all the different steps are so you can create your own. Each one is just like, each KC7 game is essentially like someone solving an intrusion and telling you the steps that they took to solve it. And then you kind of like shadowing them through it. So he got really good at it. He started presenting at conferences. Again, never worked a day in IT, never worked a day in cybersecurity, but like he was presenting at conferences and people were like, who the heck is this guy? And eventually he actually got hired as an analyst, as a researcher at Microsoft. And like, that was like the craziest story. Again, like all through his hard work, right? But he had the opportunity to like put in the work, put in the time, and showed that like, hey, like I do belong here. Like I can do this. I can be successful here. And Jimmy's story is so special because I think it's a blueprint for what can happen for so many other people who otherwise would not even think of themselves as a person who can be successful in cybersecurity, or who have what it takes, or who could even be interested, right? They can go from that point where they're like, oh, I don't know about that cybersecurity thing. So, oh, this is kind of cool, to like, yeah, like I'm about this stuff. Let's do it. Let's have some success in it.
That is so huge. I think what people need to understand is that cybersecurity is a band of misfits. A lot of us are here because we find interest in the work that we do. Like if you think hacking is cool, if you thought anything related to penetration testing or defending against those hackers is cool and you have a genuine interest in this, you can learn. And the access to this knowledge is easier to access than it ever has been before.
Exactly.
And you get to be the founder of an amazing organization that makes games, that actually makes it so simple to learn this complex information. So I love that you bring up the identity part. Like you do not need to be someone who has years of IT experience or be technical whatsoever to become a practitioner in security. And Jibby's a great example of that. There's just so much about this that I love, and I want to find every possible way to support you. And when I say that, I mean that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you really made a good point about like technical versus non-technical. And that's, Greg Schlomer is the president of the KC7 Foundation. And we talk, we wax poetic about all sorts of KC7 things all the time. And one of the best things that we love to talk about is the idea of like a technical person versus a non-technical person, right? Which is so important. Because a lot of the times when we say technical versus non-technical, it hasn't been well defined. Usually those labels get placed on super early, right? Like you're in class and they're like, oh, this person, or it could be in high school, it could be in middle school, it could be in college. And people will say, hey, I'm a technical person, so I will go and I will do that hackathon. Or I'm a non-technical person, so I will not do that hackathon. Or I will work on the non-technical part of that hackathon. But the way we actually place these labels, or the way they're placed, are usually along gender and ethnic lines, whether you admit it or not, right? If you ever go to a hackathon and see who's in the technical bucket, even hiring within companies, I want you to look around. The technical bucket, it's like usually the dudes, usually the white guys. And then usually like with women, we'll either place them in the non-technical bucket. But the earlier that happens, it's accentuated over time, where if you are in the technical bucket early on, people will say, okay, go do more technical stuff. We will give you more technical things. This event is for technical people, and this event is for non-technical people. And so it just gets worse and worse over time. And then eventually you get to a point where you're in a room for a cybersecurity analyst and it's all dudes. And you're like, well, how did this happen? It's like, well, at some point we decided to label people as technical as non-technical. Yeah. And then it just like, the problem just got worse and worse and worse. But if you can early on say like, hey, like the idea that you're a non-technical person is just BS and you can do whatever the heck you want to, and you have the ability to do that. Well, now you can give people the opportunity to like break those molds, do technical work, because cybersecurity analysis is technical work. And our thing is that like anybody can do that and anybody can be quote unquote technical. There's no like technical person. There are just people who do technical work. And anybody can wake up in the morning and do technical work. You don't got to be a technical person. Yeah. And so getting people to reframe that, I think, is a huge part of the problem with diversity in cybersecurity. Like when I was at Howard, the biggest thing is people, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not technical. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not technical? There's no such thing as a technical person. They're just people who do technical work. And you can wake up today and you can do technical things. You have the ability to do that. And part of that, again, is the representation issue. If you don't see yourself represented with people who do technical things, you're like, oh, I'm not a technical person.
Yeah, there's no Mrs. Robot. There's Mr. Robot. Right. It's Rami Malek, and he's out there poning boxes with Callie.
And that makes such a difference. Like who you see represented will impact whether or not you call yourself a technical person. And that is just accentuated, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Yeah. So you have to figure out somewhere along the line, you have to break it and be like, all right, like there's no such thing as technical versus non-technical. You can be technical. You can do technical work. You can do that today. You can do that tomorrow. Like these labels don't really exist, and there's no point of applying them.
Yeah. Got to be like Khaleesi, bro. We just have to break all the chains.
Break all the chains.
We got to break every barrier of perceived knowledge gaps Like, we have to reframe the mindset that we approach situations.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really glad that we had this conversation, because I was speaking with Ismael Valenzuela. So he's the SANS instructor and course author of the SANS Sec 530 course, which is Defensible Security Architecture.
Yeah.
Brilliant mind, absolutely brilliant. And he was telling me that the definition of hackers is problem solving, like being able to break things apart, essentially. I think the same thing applies when we think about hacking. So there's a couple of ways I want to go with this. When it comes to reframing, there's a book that Ismail actually recommended to me, and it was called I Moved Your Cheese. Have you ever heard about it?
I have not.
So it's a book that talks about how there are 3 mice that are in a maze, and each one has their own approach to escaping the maze. And they do it in 3 different ways, which are personas that people can relate to. But it talks about how besides those 3 mice, there's so many other mice that are in the maze that are completely content with being in that maze, that are just like, these are the situations, this is the circumstance, we are fine. Like, we have to deal with what's in front of us and settle for the circumstances that are here. But there are these 3 mice who say, hell no, like, I want to see what's up outside of there. I'm going to do everything possible to figure out what that might be. So it's really just an exercise on thinking outside the box. Like, one of my favorite quotes is, there's no such thing as a checkmate. You can always flip the table. And I think about that and I'm like, that's such radical thinking, but that approach is what's required for you to realize that you don't have to stick around in the maze. My favorite line from that entire book, like, I love that book so much and I recommend it to you. It's only about an hour and a half on the audiobook. My favorite quote is, the problem is not that the mouse was in the maze. The problem was that the maze was in the mouse.
Oh. Bars.
Bars.
That's a really good line.
Yeah. So in a sense, like, our limits are self-imposed, and it's really enriching to be around people who don't have that same feeling of like self-imposed limits. So,
but sometimes you don't know the maze is in the mouse, right? Like, you don't realize it, and so like,
in the maze.
how can you? Yeah, like, it's like you have to encounter the mouse, and you have to tell the mouse, like, what if you were not in the maze? And then the mouse has to think, whoa, like, mind blown, like, I could do that, right? I think it's about creating those opportunities for people, because sometimes it's like you're just a product of the situations that you've experienced, right? And so if you can come along and just jolt someone's world and be like, you've always thought about things this way, but like, here's a completely new opportunity and thing that could happen to you that could change someone's life. And that's what I think that's what we should try to create.
That would be huge. There's one last thing that I wanted to touch on about, like, the distinction between technical and non-technical.
Yeah.
I think you're right. There is no difference between technical and non-technical, in that whether you're technical or non-technical, you have to do a level of problem solving every time you wake up. Like, you've got to have your routine. Like, how do you approach your day? How do you problem solve? How do you get yourself through the toughest situations in life? Like, you've got to think about it. You lay out some steps and you find out which is the best one to do. And each option has its distinct, like, pros and cons, right? That's the exact same framework for a SOC analyst and a threat. Like, whether you're hunting down APTs or deciding what ingredient you want to put in your pancakes, that's all problem solving.
Exactly. Or, like, you ever heard, like, Swifties, right? Taylor Swift will post something on Instagram and all of a sudden, like, everyone's doing hardcore investigation to see where it might be located or what it might mean about, like, when the next concert is dropping. And I'm like, y'all are doing some very hardcore analysis here. In fact, this is higher quality analysis than a lot of people do in cybersecurity. Right? And so you have all these people who have investigative skills. You can literally take this same skill set that you're applying and apply it to this whole industry. And it's like, okay, well, if I can just show you the way of the parallels, you might realize that, hey, you enjoy it. Like, you ever heard of people talk about Instagram sleuths, where they're only someone's name and I can find the person on social media, or show me a picture and I can tell you exactly where they are, like that type of thing. These are all analysis skills. You have to figure out how to find that and tell people, hey, if you enjoy this, you might also enjoy this other thing that you might be really good at it. And it pays well, right? You just might not have known that was a possibility for you.
We need to get every Swiftie into cybersecurity.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh man, Swifties, if you're listening to this, cybersecurity is a career for you. There's one person that, like, brought up into mind. You know that guy who's on Reels where he'll just see, like, a Google Maps photo and he'll just click somewhere in the world. He'll get it within, I don't know, a few miles. That's an insane amount of analysis right there. So he'd probably be an expert threat intel analyst.
Oh, he would be so good at it.
Be the best. Okay, so where is KC7 right now? And where would you like to take KC7?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are, whatever, like
17,000 players?
Users, yeah. We started from scratch, and I think we're gaining momentum. We're moving out into like the high school space very rapidly, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of demand for like cybersecurity education in the high school space, like getting people interested in cybersecurity, becoming more cyber aware, as well as getting those technical skills. And we found that like a game-based approach actually gives students something to be excited about in a way that they never thought they would, right? When you gamify something, right? You have leaderboards, you have something for like teachers to work around. There's a lot of excitement around that. So we're moving in multiple vectors to like get this into as many high schools as possible.
Yeah.
And we're like kind of at the early stages of that, but it's happening. We're seeing the word of mouth spread, and we see people just like randomly hop on the platform, and we're like, hey, like here's a high school and they have 100 people playing it today. I'm like, what's going on over there? No idea, but somebody's having fun over there.
Yeah.
So that's super exciting. And then we're also thinking about like, you know, how can we make it easier for like teachers and professors to use, right? There's a lot of people out there who want to do the work and who have the people that they're serving, and we don't know where they are. But once we do find them, we want to give them the tools they need to serve the folks. And that's really the role that we're playing is, you know, we have people who are excited, who have the time, who have the energy, want to do the thing. They just need the right tool to do the thing. And we're really creating that tool to help them get better. But really, I think, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can slice it. And where we want to be is we want to be a universal tool that anyone can use to learn cybersecurity, whether or not you are in high school or middle school, or you're in college, or you're transitioning professionals, you want to switch your career from nursing or accounting or woodworking into cybersecurity. Like, we want to be a tool that is free and available for you to like take control of your future, right? And so we're just trying to figure out like what are ways that we can let people know about this thing, right? But at the end of the day, right, like it's like, oh, it's a silly game. What can this silly game do for me? And I
change your life.
Change your life, right? It's about convincing people that like, hey, this silly game can change your life, right? I think when people think about, I'm going to break into cybersecurity, what do they do first? Oh, I'm going to like pay $1,000 to go into this boot camp or certification.
That's so true.
But you don't always know if cybersecurity is for you, right? Maybe it's not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
And so if you're tight on money, right, and the bills are due and you want to change your life, you don't want to like, I think spending $1,000 on a course could be a good show of commitment that you want to go towards there, but maybe you can keep your $1,000 and play a stupid little game and it'll change your life, right? Or you can use it towards something else, right? So we want to give people a free avenue or an affordable avenue to go and do that. And part of the challenge, again, is figuring out how we can sustain that. And
yeah.
We're not going to charge you. We're going to figure out how to get someone else to pay for that.
So
right.
How does KC7 grow from here? If you were to imagine KC7 in 5-10 years, like what can you see the platform kind of transforming into?
I see it as a platform that educational institutions use to teach people, that nonprofits use, but as well as a platform where companies use to train their people. I've been in a SOC before and I've had to train someone, and it takes a long time to get people to build that neuroplasticity around analysis. If this can be something that defenders, no matter what level, can use to up-level their people, to encounter threat actors that maybe they don't see, they haven't encountered already, get their people trained on that. I think that's going to up-level the entire blue team field. Because if you can train your analysts on every single APT and every single cybercrime actor before you see it in your own data platforms, etc.
Yeah, while they're in high school.
While they're in high school, college, or even your new hires, you will be very good. You should be in every scenario like, oh, I've seen that before. Because if you've seen it before, you will be very much better at hunting it. So I think that's a way of systematically uplifting the entire blue team space and make the bar higher for red teamers. Like, I want to make sure that you guys suffer and you guys have to work that much harder every single time to do what you do. Because if everyone's better on the blue team space and everyone has seen that before and everyone knows how to make better detections, then you guys are going to come in there and you'll be like, I'm going to try this. I'm like, nope, we already seen that. We got detections for that. We know how to hunt for it. We know what happens next, right? We want to make sure that that bar is that much higher. Again, there's like things that red teamers do systematically give themselves the upper hand. But I think there's also things that blue teamers can do to systematically give ourselves an upper hand. And part of that, again, is KC7, like give people opportunity to look at it, give people the opportunities to understand all types of stuff so that they're just better at hunting, better at making detections, better at making the red teamer suffer a little bit.
Better at being defenders, raising the standard of defense so that way we can raise the standard of offense. Because offense informs defense.
Yeah.
If we've got better defense, better offense, we got a safer world.
Yeah. As red teamers, you got to come and bring your A game. You can't do that little stuff anymore, right?
Man, I wanted to tell you this personally. So you're actually like a celebrity among my interns and some of the students at San Jose State University.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So San Jose State University, with the ISSA, this organization that I'm on the nonprofit board for.
Yeah.
So I'm the student education director. And a huge passion of mine is helping students get access to cybersecurity, to realize this is a pretty damn cool field.
Yeah.
You can make a bag, and that life can be very interesting, and that you'll be surrounded by really, really, really intelligent people who will challenge you to be your best. Among them, they have this program at San Jose State led by Professor Tanya.
Yes.
You've spoken to her.
I've worked with her a lot.
Tanya's incredible.
She's incredible.
Yeah. So she has set up a program where students from San Jose State will actually use KC7 and offer proctored sessions to high school students. They have a whole training program for this. And you're doing this where there's this steady pipeline of college students who are training high school students, and they're being introduced to this field that they might have not otherwise heard about. So
that's so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
The work is making an impact.
I love to hear that, because sometimes you see numbers.
Yeah.
You know, when you're on the ground and you're doing every event yourself, right? You can see people, you can hear the stories, but at a certain point when you want to make bigger impact, you're like, we're just going to let people do that. You don't always hear the stories. You just see numbers. And so when you get to hear the stories behind the numbers, I think that's an awesome feeling that gives you a little bit more juice to keep going.
Hell yeah, man. So I'm definitely going to pop off in the group chat and be like, I just met your hero. So I'd like to wrap with a few questions.
Yeah.
So a question or a few questions that I ask every guest. So Simeon, you're the CEO of KC7. I would love to hear from you. What is the greatest piece of professional advice you've ever received, and how did it impact you?
I would say the biggest thing is just like, and it's not necessarily advice that I've received. I think it's an observation from the people who I admire in professional. It's just like, be humble at whatever level you're at. Come in the room and like, don't be afraid to look dumb. Like, be willing to ask the dumb questions and be the person who says like, I don't know, but like, let's figure it out. Mm-hmm. I think that will, one, makes you a little bit more relatable and make people want to work with you. And two, help people understand that like, hey, it's okay to like ask questions and not know everything. But then I think that curiosity also allows you to, learn things that you otherwise wouldn't have learned and see perspectives that you wouldn't have. And so some of the smartest people that I've worked with are also the most humble and willing to say like, hey, I don't know, let's figure it out. Like, you don't have to be perfect, but it's about the journey and not necessarily the destination.
I love that advice. So what is advice that you wish you would have heard sooner in your career?
Advice I wish I would have heard sooner in my career. It is advice I heard, but didn't necessarily take the most advantage of, and making the most of the relationships that you build, right? And I think, when it comes to networking, especially in this field, right, you're going to meet a lot of people, but figuring out how to build genuine relationships with them will take you so far. And not just at a surface level, but really getting to know people, right? Like even in the KC7 journey, like most of that, the hardest part of that, honestly, has just been building relationships and trust with people, right? Because so much of that has been people hearing about it, hearing about the people behind it, and then willing to put their reputations and butts on the line for this thing, right? You will meet one person who will introduce you to another person who will introduce you to another person. I met Joe Stalker as a 3rd, 4th degree connect, right? And then he introduced me to you. And so it just goes on and on and on. And so much of that is about building relationships as humans so that somebody, KO can go out and say like, hey, I met Simeon. Like, he's a real cool guy. Like, we bonded. Like, I think he means what he says when he says he's going to do X, Y, and Z. Like, he's about that life. He's going to go and he's going to perform. He's going to try to do the right thing. And like, yeah, sometimes we can think of networking as this like superficial thing, but it's about like, how do you build the right human relationships? And it won't be with everyone, but like you will find your people. And all of that matters.
So I think that's an important distinction because there are people who approach professionalism with the approach of, I'm going to keep my professional life completely separate from my personal life.
Yeah.
I'm personally of the mind where if I can be as authentic as I can possibly be with you and show as much of my natural enthusiasm for what we're doing and also make some friends along the way.
That's perfect.
Like, that's a great way to live life. Granted, there are some other people who are just like, I don't want any of that business. I don't want anything to do with you. And that's completely fine.
Which is fine. Yeah. Sometimes you got a 9 to 5 and you work that job and you have other passions in life.
True.
Fair. Yeah.
That's true. Find the people you link with along the way. I think throughout this journey, so I've been on the road for about a month and a half now. I've had a lot of time to like be introspective, and I've had so much time to just speak to really, really accomplished people in the industry, people who I thought I would honestly never have any business speaking to. And I think what I've learned through this is that there's a level of like the law of attraction being in effect here.
Yeah.
Like if you build it, they will come. If you pursue your dreams, if you surround yourself and you put that energy out there, like you will find other people like you who are also on this journey of pursuing their dreams. And I just love this energy that I'm around. And I thank you for being part of this journey.
Yeah, thank you.
So I've got a couple more questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So one is, what's the craziest story you've ever heard from the industry? It could be your craziest or your favorite. Like for me, it's the Stuxnet worm. Love me some Stuxnet worm. It's what got me into cyber. Someone told me about like a 0-day on an iPhone where they literally saw it unlock and enable 2-factor and bypass authentication.
There's a really cool Proofpoint blog. I forget what the TA number is, but it's about an Iranian threat actor that uses social media. You ever heard of honeypot to attract individuals? And this is like my favorite story because we think about cybersecurity in such a technical way of like, hey, like malware and all that. This threat actor has like the most garbage malware, like worst malware you've ever seen. But the way that they deliver this malware is by building relationships with people, right? Like, trying to convince them to get into long-term romantic relationships so that when the malware does come around, the individuals will run it multiple times. And I think that's such a cool story. I think there's a couple blogs written out there because it forces us to think differently about what cybersecurity is, right? Because you might have the most technical provisions out there to find and stop malicious activity, but if you evict the stuff and someone still has a relationship off to the side with a supposed partner, they will find a different way to get that malware onto your system. And it will never stop until you figure out what is going on beyond just the cyber piece of what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Man, that is absolutely huge. I think people forget that social engineering is a huge part of cybersecurity. People will always be the weakest link. Doesn't matter how incredible that firewall throughput is. It doesn't matter how awesome that signature might be. If someone's going to pick up the phone and get pwned by someone who they think is in love with them, that is the human element of cybersecurity, which I'm not sure will ever be solved.
Yeah. And, I think the other thing is that like, as defenders, we have our weaknesses and we have our strengths, but adversaries also have strengths and weaknesses. And, it's just a game of like, figuring out what your adversary's strengths and weaknesses are and making sure that you're countering that perfectly and yours are just a little bit better.
That was huge. All right. So is there anything else that you'd like to share?
One thing, a big part of the KC7 journey when we first started, right? And I talked about how we wanted to build KC7, right? It was about building it with the idea of scarcity in mind. And when we talk about diversity and why that matters, right? When I wanted to talk about how I built KC7 and why it mattered, I built it the way it did. I built it for a scarce environment, right? Because we're trying to target HBCUs initially. And, having been in one, like, I know that, like, you're not going to show up with the thing that requires, like, tons of memory on a computer and tons of installation or high cost or, like, super technical and expect that to go off without a hitch. Like, that's not going to work, right? If it takes too long to install, if it requires too much, like a teacher who has like years of experience with technical skill in that particular thing, or if it costs a ton of money, like you're not going to find success. And I think there were a lot of tools out there and those tools hit one of those marks. And it was just like, yes, this is a very good thing, but like it cannot survive in a scarce environment, right? Like a low resource environment. And we thought about, okay, we're going to build this thing, but the important thing is to think about building it for a low resource environment where like literally any school, no matter how much resources can get off the ground. But because we built it that way, right, we were able to scale so much more to so many different places. And that was able to help so many people out, right? Because in a high school, you don't have the ability to download all these things, or you might not have a segregated network to all these things. You may not be able to download Splunk and do X, Y, and Z. And so we always thought about like, how do you reduce the time it takes to get and the effort, resources it takes to get people access to the thing, right? That's a diversity perspective, right? But because we had that at our core, it allowed us to solve the problem for so many other things, right?
I see.
And so back to our conversation earlier about why it matters to think about diversity or think about altruism, right? Sometimes it'll allow you, if you didn't have that perspective, you'd be like, okay, well, why does it matter if you only need to run this thing in a browser, right? Like where would you have things that you can download? Like that's not really a big problem. Or why does it matter for you able to instantaneously download this data or to reduce the technical complexities here, right? But because we're thinking about those things, we can solve the problem and solve it for a lot of other people, which is why I strive to always tell people, hey, don't just think about diversity or think about altruism as like a side checkbox that's changing the thing. Think about it in the context of like, hey, this is like business critical. And then you will end up solving problems that people didn't know they had, right? If you solve, there's a specific phrase for it, but if you solve problems for folks at the bottom, right, like everyone has benefit and everyone comes up as a result of that.
I can definitely see how the HBCU and the Cambridge University global experience has influenced your perspective on not only cybersecurity, but also business. It's a very unique perspective, and I'm happy to have been able to share this time with you. I look forward to seeing KC7 absolutely crush it, and I will scream it from the mountaintops. I think what you're doing is amazing, Simeon. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I know your company is going to, do some amazing things, and I'm so excited to, especially for such a young CEO of color, like we don't see very much of those. There's not too many of those out there, and so just to see you be so confident in what you're doing, I think that's going to make a huge difference, not just for yourself, but for a lot of other people out there. And super proud of the work that you're doing.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
We have a tradition where we close out each episode with a DAP. Do you know what a DAP is?
I know what a DAP is.
All right. It's going to be perfect first try. You ready?
All right.
3, 2.
Let's go.
Thanks for tuning in to KO's Launchpad, where cybersecurity meets opportunity. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others on their cybersecurity journey. Stay curious and keep charting your course to success. Until next time.